The morning sun cast long shadows across the tarmac at Naval Air Station Oceana, but Lieutenant Commander Kira Ripple Volkov wasn't looking at the sunrise. She was staring at her F-18E Super Hornet, tail number 301, where someone had scratched a message into the gray paint just below her cockpit. The words were barely visible, carved with deliberate precision. Remember Kandahar. Remember why you survived. Her hands trembled as she traced the letters with her fingertip. 3 years had passed since Afghanistan, since the night that changed everything. The night that earned her the call sign she'd grown to hate. The night that made her question whether she deserved the wings on her chest. "Ripple, you good?" Chief Petty Officer Marcus Webb approached with his usual swagger, coffee in hand, and a maintenance clipboard tucked under his arm. At 22, he was barely old enough to drink, but he'd already developed the cocky attitude of someone who thought he understood combat aviation. "Fine," Kira replied, pulling her helmet from under her arm and adjusting her flight suit. She'd learned not to show weakness around the younger pilots and crew. They already whispered about her enough. Webb squinted at the aircraft's fuselage. "What's that scratched into your bird?" "Nothing important." She climbed the ladder to her cockpit, hoping he wouldn't pursue it. The message wasn't meant for him anyway. It was meant for her, and she had a sinking feeling she knew who'd left it. The briefing room buzzed with the usual pre-flight chatter. 12 F-18s were scheduled for a routine training exercise over the Atlantic, practicing defensive formations against simulated enemy aircraft. Nothing special, nothing dangerous. Just another day of keeping their skills sharp in case the real thing ever came calling again. Commander Jake "Titan" Morrison stood at the front of the room, his weathered face serious as he outlined the mission parameters. "We're looking at clear skies, minimal wind, perfect conditions for formation work. Ripple, you'll be flying wing position in the secondary element." Kira nodded, not surprised. She'd been flying wing positions for months now, ever since her return from medical leave. The Navy had cleared her for flight duty, but trust was something else entirely. Trust had to be earned back, one cautious mission at a time. "Remember," Morrison continued, "this is about precision. Stay tight, stay disciplined, and nobody gets creative out there. We're not trying to impress anyone today." His eyes lingered on Kira for just a moment too long. She'd heard the stories they told about her, how she'd lost her nerve, how she'd made mistakes that cost lives, how she'd been grounded for psychological evaluation and came back different, quieter, more careful. What they didn't know was that the message on her aircraft had changed everything. Someone wanted her to remember. Someone wanted her to understand that her survival hadn't been luck or cowardice. It had been something else entirely. The engines of 12 Super Hornets roared to life across the tarmac, their twin afterburners casting heat waves that distorted the morning air. Kira's hands moved through the startup sequence with practiced efficiency, muscle memory guiding her through systems checks and communications protocols. The familiar weight of her helmet, the subtle vibration of the aircraft around her, the methodical voice of air traffic control, it all felt like coming home. Oceana Tower, Titan Flight of 12, request taxi for departure. Morrison's voice crackled through her headset. Titan Flight, Oceana Tower, taxi via Alpha, hold short of runway 05 left. The formation began moving, 12 deadly machines rolling in perfect synchronization toward the active runway. Kira's position in the secondary element kept her toward the back of the group, but she could see the lead aircraft clearly. Morrison's jet bore the distinctive markings of their squadron, VFA 143, Pukin Dogs, a legacy unit with a history stretching back to World War II. As they approached the runway, her radar warning receiver chirped softly. Standard procedure for a training flight, they'd be monitored by ground-based systems throughout the exercise. But something about the tone seemed different today, more insistent, more deliberate. Titan Flight Tower, winds 060 at 8 knots, cleared for takeoff. Morrison's afterburners ignited first, followed by his wingman, then the second element, then the third. The roar was deafening even through her helmet's noise cancellation. Kira felt the familiar surge of adrenaline as her turn approached. These moments never got old. The transition from earthbound machine to airborne weapon, the sudden freedom of three-dimensional movement, the raw power of military-grade turbofan engines pushing her toward the sky. Her throttles moved forward to military power, then into afterburner. The acceleration pressed her back into her ejection seat as her Super Hornet leaped forward, leaving the ground behind in a thunderous climb. Within seconds, she was airborne, her aircraft automatically adjusting its flight path to maintain formation with the other jets. The Virginia coastline fell away beneath them as they climbed to their assigned altitude. The Atlantic Ocean stretched endlessly ahead, its surface broken only by the occasional fishing vessel or cargo ship. At 25,000 feet, the world below looked peaceful, almost serene. It was hard to imagine that this same ocean had witnessed countless battles, countless acts of heroism and sacrifice. But Kira wasn't thinking about history. She was thinking about the message scratched into her aircraft, about Kandahar, about the night that changed everything, about the reason she'd survived when others hadn't. The memories were always there, just beneath the surface, waiting for moments like this when the familiar routine of military aviation made her guard drop. Her radar display showed all 12 aircraft maintaining perfect formation. The training exercise was proceeding exactly as planned. But something felt different about today, something she couldn't quite identify. The voice of Airborne Warning and Control System, AWACS, cut through her thoughts. Titan Flight, this is Overlord. Stand by for exercise initiation. Unknown aircraft bearing 090, range 120 nautical miles, altitude Angels 28, heading 270. Designated Bandit 1. This was it. The simulated enemy aircraft that would test their defensive capabilities. Kira's hands moved automatically to her weapon systems, even though she knew her missiles were training rounds. The muscle memory was still there, the instinctive preparation for combat that had kept her alive through 2 deployments. But as she adjusted her radar scope to acquire the target, she noticed something odd. The electronic signature didn't match any aircraft in their training scenarios. It was stronger, more complex, almost as if it were designed to penetrate their radar defenses rather than simply test them. Titan II, you seeing this signature? She transmitted on the discrete frequency used by her element. Negative, Ripple. Standard training profile on my scope. That was impossible. She was looking at the same airspace, the same target. But somehow she was seeing something different. Something that made her skin crawl with a familiar sense of dread. The message on her aircraft suddenly made perfect sense. Remember Kandahar. Remember why you survived. Because 3 years ago, in the mountains of Afghanistan, she'd seen something that shouldn't have been there. Something that had cost her element lead his life and earned her a reputation for unreliability. Something that had made her question everything she thought she knew about aerial combat. Now it was happening again. Commander Morrison's voice filled the radio frequency with calm authority. Titan Flight, prepare for defensive split. We'll execute a standard 4-ship spread into net formation. Maintain visual contact and watch for the merge. Kira's heart rate increased as she watched the formation begin to separate. The 4 lead aircraft, Morrison's element, would spread into a wide defensive pattern designed to maximize their radar coverage and provide mutual support. The second element, including her aircraft, would maintain a higher altitude and serve as backup. It was a textbook maneuver, practiced thousands of times in training and proven effective in combat. But as she watched Morrison's Super Hornet bank left to take its position, she saw something that made her blood run cold. There was another message scratched into the paint on his aircraft, just like hers, just like the one that had appeared overnight on her jet. The letters were too small to read from her position, but she could see the deliberate scratches in the gray paint, the same careful precision that had marked her own aircraft. Titan Lead, this is Ripple, she transmitted, her voice steady despite the growing alarm in her chest. I need you to check your aircraft for any unusual markings. Morrison's response was immediate and dismissive. Ripple, maintain radio discipline. We're approaching the merge point. But Kira wasn't listening to the merge point anymore. She was thinking about Kandahar, about the night she tried to warn her flight leader about something that didn't belong in their airspace, about how he dismissed her concerns right up until the moment he was shot down by a missile that officially didn't exist. The AWACS controller's voice cut through her memories. Titan flight, Bandit 1 now bearing 085, range 60 nautical miles. Additional contacts bearing 040 and 120, range 100 nautical miles. Designate Bandit 2 and Bandit 3. 3 aircraft now. The training scenario had called for only one simulated enemy, but there were 3 contacts on the screen, and they were moving in a coordinated pattern that suggested tactical training far beyond what any aggressor squadron would use in a routine exercise. Kira's hands moved to her electronic warfare systems, activating sensors that would give her a more detailed picture of the approaching aircraft. What she saw made her stomach drop. The electronic signatures were wrong. Not just unusual, completely wrong. These weren't F-16s or F-5s from the aggressor squadron. These were something else entirely. Titan Flight Overlord, be advised, exercise parameters have changed. You are now cleared to engage multiple targets with simulated weapons. Repeat, you are cleared to engage. The authorization should have been routine, but something about the controller's voice bothered her. Too precise, too formal, as if he were reading from a script rather than managing a training exercise. Morrison's element began their defensive maneuver, spreading into the classic 4-ship net formation that would allow them to engage the approaching aircraft from multiple angles. It was beautiful to watch, the 12 Super Hornets moving with the precision of a choreographed dance, each pilot maintaining perfect position while preparing for simulated combat. But Kira wasn't watching the formation anymore. She was watching her radar display, where the 3 approaching aircraft had suddenly multiplied into 6, then 9, then 12. The screen was filling with contacts that shouldn't exist, aircraft that appeared to be materializing out of thin air. And each one was broadcasting an electronic signature that she recognized from her nightmares. The same signature that had appeared over Kandahar 3 years ago, moments before her element lead disappeared in a ball of fire. Morrison's voice crackled through her headset, calm and professional. Titan Flight, tally multiple bandits. Looks like they've upgraded the scenario. Everyone stay sharp and watch your 6. He still didn't understand. None of them did. This wasn't a training exercise anymore. This was something else entirely, something that had been carefully orchestrated to look like training right up until the moment it wasn't. Kira's hand moved to her radio selector, switching to the emergency frequency. But before she could transmit, Her electronic warfare system screamed an alert that made her blood freeze. Her aircraft was being painted by a radar system that didn't exist in any training scenario. A system she'd encountered only once before, in the mountains of Afghanistan, moments before everything went wrong. The message on her aircraft suddenly made perfect sense. Remember Kandahar. Remember why you survived. She'd survived because she'd seen the truth, even when no one else would believe her. She'd survived because she'd trusted her instincts over her training, her experience over her orders. Now she had to do it again. Titan flight, this is Ripple, she transmitted, her voice cutting through the tactical chatter. We have a problem. These aren't training aircraft. Repeat, these are not training aircraft. The response was immediate and predictable. Morrison's voice, sharp with irritation. Ripple, maintain radio discipline. You're compromising the exercise. But Kira wasn't listening anymore. She was watching her radar display, where the impossible contacts were moving in patterns that no human pilot could execute. Acceleration curves that exceeded the physical limits of any known aircraft. Turn rates that would kill any pilot who attempted them. They weren't just unidentified aircraft. They were something that shouldn't exist. And they were heading straight for Morrison's formation. The first missile launch lit up her radar warning receiver like a Christmas tree. Not a simulated launch, a real one. The electronic signature was unmistakable, the threat tone urgent and desperate. Somewhere in the growing chaos of the air battle, someone had just fired a live weapon. Titan lead, break right, break right. Kira's voice cut through the radio chatter, her training overriding her fear. Missile in the air, this is not a drill. Morrison's Super Hornet rolled hard to the right, his wingman following in perfect formation. But the missile wasn't tracking them. It was tracking something else, something that appeared on her radar scope for just a moment before disappearing entirely. One of the impossible aircraft had just been shot down. The realization hit her like a physical blow. This wasn't an attack on their formation. This was something else entirely. Someone else was engaging the unknown aircraft, someone who had been waiting for this moment, someone who had scratched messages into aircraft paint to make sure the right people were paying attention. Her electronic warfare system screamed another alert. Multiple missile launches now, coming from directions that made no tactical sense. The sky around them was filling with invisible aircraft engaged in a battle that officially wasn't happening. Titan flight, this is Overlord. Exercise terminated. Return to base immediately. But the AWACS controller's voice was different now. Younger, more urgent, as if the original controller had been replaced by someone who actually understood what was happening. Morrison's voice filled the radio frequency, professional composure cracking for the first time. Overlord, Titan lead. We're showing multiple missile launches in our vicinity. Request immediate vector to safe airspace. Titan lead, Overlord. Vector 090, descend to Angels 15. Maintain formation and do not engage any targets. The order was clear, but Kira's radar was showing something that made compliance impossible. The unknown aircraft were following them, maintaining position just outside visual range. They weren't attacking, but they weren't leaving either. They were escorting the Navy formation, as if protecting them from something else. Her hands moved to her weapon systems, even though she knew her missiles were training rounds. The gesture was automatic, instinctive, the result of years of training and combat experience. But as her fingers found the master arm switch, she noticed something that made her heart race. The switch was already in the armed position. Her missiles weren't training rounds. Someone had loaded her aircraft with live weapons. The realization should have terrified her, but instead it brought a strange sense of clarity. The message on her aircraft, the impossible radar contacts, the live weapons, it was all connected. Someone had been planning this for months, maybe years. Someone who knew exactly what had happened over Kandahar and why it mattered. Someone who needed her to remember why she'd survived. Titan 2, this is Ripple. She switched to the discrete frequency used by her element. Check your weapon's status. The response was immediate and alarmed. Ripple Titan 2, showing armed status on all weapons. That's not possible. But it was possible. It was happening. And it meant that someone had been planning this exercise very carefully, making sure that when the moment came, they would be ready. The question was, ready for what? Her radar warning receiver chirped softly, indicating that she was being scanned by a friendly aircraft. But the scan was coming from a direction where no friendly aircraft should be. She looked up through her canopy, squinting against the sun, trying to identify the source of the radar energy. What she saw made her gasp. Another F-18 Super Hornet flying in perfect formation with her element. But it wasn't one of theirs. The aircraft bore no markings, no squadron insignia, no tail numbers. It was completely gray, as if it had been deliberately stripped of any identifying features. And scratched into the paint below its cockpit was a message she could read clearly from her position. Kandahar was just the beginning. The pilot's helmet was turned toward her, and even through the tinted visor, she could see that he was watching her, waiting for her to understand. Morrison's voice crackled through her headset, strained with growing alarm. Titan flight, I'm showing additional aircraft in our formation. Overlord, we have unknown aircraft mixed in with our elements. But the AWACS controller's response was calm, almost reassuring. Titan flight, those are friendly aircraft. Continue your approach to base. Friendly aircraft, but friendly to whom? Kiera's electronic warfare system painted a picture that made no sense. The unknown aircraft were broadcasting identification codes that matched classified programs she'd never heard of. Programs that officially didn't exist, involving aircraft that had never been built and pilots who had never been trained. But she recognized the electronic signatures. She'd seen them before in the mountains of Afghanistan, during the battle that had cost her element lead his life and earned her a reputation for unreliability. The battle that had been officially classified as a training accident. The battle that had never happened. Except it had happened, and now it was happening again. The same impossible aircraft, the same electronic signatures, the same careful orchestration that made everything look normal until the moment it wasn't. But this time she was ready. "Titan flight, this is Ripple," she transmitted, her voice cutting through the growing confusion. "I need everyone to listen very carefully. What we're seeing today is connected to classified operations that occurred over Afghanistan 3 years ago. The aircraft in our formation are not enemies. They're part of a program that officially doesn't exist." The response was immediate and predictable. Morrison's voice, sharp with authority. "Ripple, you're out of line. Maintain radio discipline and follow orders." But Kiera wasn't following orders anymore. She was following her instincts, the same instincts that had kept her alive over Kandahar when everyone else had died. "Titan lead, check your aircraft for unusual markings. Check your weapons status. Ask yourself why we're carrying live missiles on a training exercise." The radio frequency fell silent for a moment. Then Morrison's voice, quieter now, uncertain. "Ripple, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the reason we're really here. The reason someone wanted us to remember." She switched her radio to the emergency frequency, knowing that her transmission would be monitored by multiple agencies. Any station, any station. This is Navy Ripple with priority traffic. We have encountered aircraft matching the electronic signatures from classified engagement over Afghanistan grid reference. She paused, realizing that even the grid reference was classified. "We need immediate clarification on the nature of this exercise." The response came not from air traffic control, but from a voice she didn't recognize. Male, middle-aged, speaking with the careful precision of someone who had been waiting for this moment. "Ripple, this is Gatekeeper. We've been waiting for you to make contact. Please follow the unmarked aircraft to the designated coordinates. Do not deviate from their flight path." Gatekeeper. The code name sent a chill through her bones. She'd heard it once before, in a classified briefing she'd attended after returning from Afghanistan. A briefing about programs that didn't exist and aircraft that were never built. Morrison's voice filled the radio frequency, professional composure completely gone now. Gatekeeper, this is Titan Lead. I need clarification on the nature of this exercise and the authority under which we're operating. Titan Lead, you are now under operational control of Gatekeeper. Your aircraft are equipped with live weapons for a specific purpose. Trust your wingman's judgment and follow her lead. Her lead, not Morrison's lead, her lead. The significance wasn't lost on anyone in the formation. In the space of a few radio transmissions, command authority had shifted from the senior squadron commander to the pilot everyone considered unreliable, to the pilot who had been grounded for psychological evaluation and returned to duty under a cloud of suspicion, to the pilot who had seen the truth over Kandahar and lived to tell about it. The unmarked aircraft began a gentle turn toward the east, away from their planned return to base. One by one, the Navy formation followed, their pilots struggling to understand what was happening but following orders nonetheless. Kira found herself in the lead position, her aircraft ahead of even Morrison's. It was a position she hadn't occupied in 3 years, not since the night everything went wrong. But it felt right. It felt like coming home. Ripple, this is Gatekeeper. How copy? Gatekeeper, Ripple. I copy you 5 by 5. Ripple, you're about to see something that will explain everything. The aircraft you encountered over Afghanistan were not enemy aircraft. They were ours. Part of a program designed to test our pilots' ability to recognize and respond to technology that officially doesn't exist. The words should have been shocking, but somehow they weren't. Part of her had always known that the official story didn't make sense. The electronic signatures had been too advanced, the flight characteristics too impossible, the timing too convenient. Your element lead died because he engaged aircraft that he thought were hostile. You survived because you questioned what you were seeing. You recognized that the situation wasn't what it appeared to be. The memories came flooding back. The moment she'd realized that the approaching aircraft weren't behaving like enemy fighters, the way they'd seemed to be testing the Navy formation rather than attacking it. The electronic signatures that matched no known aircraft in any intelligence database. She'd tried to warn her element lead, but he'd been too focused on the tactical situation to listen. Too committed to following the rules of engagement to question whether they applied to the situation at hand. The program has been running for over a decade, Gatekeeper continued. We identify pilots who demonstrate exceptional situational awareness and the ability to think beyond their training. Pilots who can recognize when the official explanation doesn't match the observed reality. And then you recruit them, Kira said, understanding dawning. We give them the opportunity to join something that matters, something that prepares our military for threats that don't officially exist. The unmarked aircraft ahead of them began to descend, leading the formation toward a section of ocean that appeared empty on their charts. But as they approached, Kira could see the subtle distortions in the water that indicated the presence of something large just beneath the surface. "Gatekeeper, what are we approaching?" "Home," came the reply. "The place where pilots like you learn to fight battles that never happened." The water beneath them began to part, revealing a massive structure that defied every assumption about what was possible. A floating airfield, completely hidden from satellite surveillance and naval patrols. A facility that officially didn't exist, supporting operations that were never conducted by aircraft that were never built. As they approached for landing, Kira could see dozens of aircraft on the deck. Some were recognizable: F-22s, F-35s, even a few older F-16s. But others were completely unknown, their configurations suggesting capabilities that were decades ahead of anything in the official inventory. "Titan Flight, this is Gatekeeper. Welcome to the war that's never been fought." The landing was surreal. One moment they were flying over empty ocean. The next they were touching down on a runway that shouldn't exist. The facility was enormous, easily the size of a supercarrier but clearly designed for a different purpose. Instead of the busy chaos of a normal flight deck, there was an almost cathedral-like quiet, broken only by the sound of their engines spooling down. Ground crews appeared from nowhere, directing the aircraft to parking positions with the efficiency of a well-rehearsed operation. But these weren't normal Navy personnel. Their uniforms bore no branch insignia, no unit patches, no names. They moved with the precision of elite forces, but their faces showed the calm confidence of people who had been doing this for years. Kira climbed down from her cockpit, her legs shaky after the tension of the flight. The message scratched into her aircraft's paint seemed to glow in the artificial lighting of the hangar deck. "Remember Kandahar. Remember why you survived." Now she understood. She'd survived because she'd been chosen. Because someone had been watching, evaluating, waiting for the right moment to make contact. A figure approached from the shadows of the hangar. Male, middle-aged, wearing the same unmarked uniform as the ground crews. His face was weathered in the way that spoke of years of flying, but his eyes held the sharp intelligence of someone who had seen things that most people couldn't imagine. "Commander Volkov," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Colonel Marcus Chen, but you can call me Gatekeeper. Welcome to the Deep Black." She shook his hand, nodding the calluses that marked him as a pilot. "Colonel, I need to understand what's happening here. My squadron, my crew chief, the other pilots, they're going to have questions." "And we'll answer them," Chen replied. "But first, I need to know if you're ready to join a war that doesn't exist. A war fought by pilots who were never trained to fly aircraft that were never built. The question should have been difficult to answer. She had a career, a reputation to rebuild, a life to return to. But as she looked around the impossible facility, at the aircraft that defied every assumption about what was possible, she realized that she'd been preparing for this moment for 3 years. "I'm ready," she said, "but I need to know what we're fighting against." Chen smiled, the expression transforming his weathered features. "That's the right question. Come on, let me show you something that will change everything you thought you knew about air combat." He led her toward a briefing room at the edge of the hangar deck. Through the windows, she could see the other members of her formation being met by similar figures, other pilots who had been chosen for reasons they were only beginning to understand. "The aircraft you encountered over Afghanistan," Chen said as they walked, "were part of a testing program. But they weren't testing our technology. They were testing our pilots' ability to recognize and respond to technology that wasn't ours." The implication hit her like a physical blow. "You mean?" "I mean that we've been at war for over a decade with an enemy that officially doesn't exist. An enemy whose technology is so advanced that most of our pilots can't even recognize it as artificial. They see it as equipment malfunction, weather phenomena, or training accidents." They reached the briefing room, where a large screen displayed a tactical map of the world. But this wasn't any map she'd seen before. Instead of showing countries and borders, it showed patterns of activity that formed a complex, three-dimensional picture of conflict. "This is what the war really looks like," Chen said, gesturing to the display. "Not nation against nation, but reality against something that shouldn't exist. Technology against technology. Pilots who can see the truth against pilots who can't." The screen shifted, showing video footage from dozens of aerial encounters. She recognized some of them, incidents that had been classified as training accidents or equipment failures. But viewed together, they formed a pattern that was impossible to ignore. "Every pilot in your formation was chosen for a reason," Chen continued. "Commander Morrison because he can maintain tactical discipline under impossible circumstances. Lieutenant Webb because he can adapt to technology that doesn't match his training. And you because you can see the truth even when everyone else is blind to it." The video shifted to show footage from her encounter over Kandahar. She watched herself trying to warn her element lead, watched him dismiss her concerns, watched the moment when everything went wrong. "Your element lead died because he engaged aircraft that were testing him," Chen said quietly. "Aircraft that were designed to look hostile until the moment they weren't. You survived because you recognized that the situation wasn't what it appeared to be." The screen went dark, leaving them in the soft light of the briefing room. Outside, she could hear the sound of aircraft engines, the quiet efficiency of operations that officially didn't exist. "The choice is yours," Chen said. "You can return to your squadron, continue your career, pretend that none of this happened. Or you can join the war that matters, the war that determines whether humanity continues to control its own skis." Kira looked at the reflection of her call sign in the dark screen. Ripple, a name that had been given to her in mockery, a reminder of the waves she'd made by questioning what she'd seen. But now she understood what it really meant. She was someone who caused ripples, who disturbed the calm surface of accepted reality. "What do you need me to do?" Chen smiled again, and this time there was genuine warmth in the expression. "I need you to teach other pilots to see what you see, to recognize when the official explanation doesn't match the observed reality, to fight battles that never happened against enemies that don't exist." He handed her a tablet displaying a roster of names, pilots from every branch of the military, from every nation that had been quietly recruited into the program. Each name was followed by a brief description of their unique abilities, their special insight into the nature of modern aerial combat. "This is your new squadron," Chen said. "The 99th Composite Wing. Pilots who have been chosen because they can see the truth, even when it's classified beyond their clearance level." The 99th Composite Wing. She'd heard rumors about it, whispered stories about pilots who had disappeared from normal squadrons and been assigned to units that didn't appear on any organizational chart. Now she was being invited to join them. "There's one more thing," Chen said, his tone becoming more serious. "The aircraft you'll be flying. They're not like anything in the official inventory. They're built using technology that we've acquired through encounters with our unofficial enemy. Technology that pushes the boundaries of what's possible." He gestured toward the hangar, where she could see aircraft unlike anything she'd ever imagined. Fighters that seemed to bend light around them, transport aircraft that moved without visible means of propulsion, reconnaissance planes that appeared to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "The learning curve is steep," Chen continued. "The physics are different, the tactics are different, the rules of engagement are different. But the basic principles remain the same. See the truth, trust your instincts, and never let anyone convince you that what you're seeing isn't real." Kira looked at the impossible aircraft, at the pilots who were climbing into cockpits that shouldn't exist, at the screens displaying tactical information that redefined her understanding of aerial combat. Everything she'd thought she knew about military aviation was wrong. The real war was being fought by pilots who officially didn't exist, using technology that had never been developed, against enemies that were never identified. But for the first time in 3 years, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. "Colonel," she said, her voice steady with newfound purpose, "when do we start?" Chen's smile widened. "We started 3 years ago, the moment you first questioned what you were seeing over Afghanistan. Everything since then has been preparation for this moment." He led her back toward the hangar, where her new squadron was waiting. Pilots who had been chosen for the same reason she had, their ability to see beyond the official explanation, to recognize truth even when it was classified, to fight battles that never happened but determined the fate of everything that mattered. The war that didn't exist was about to begin. The briefing room for the 99th Composite Wing was unlike anything she'd ever seen. Instead of the standard military setup with rows of chairs facing a podium, this was arranged more like a situation room, with workstations arranged in a semicircle around a central display. Each station was equipped with screens showing different aspects of global aerial activity, patterns of movement that formed a complex picture of ongoing operations. "Take a seat anywhere," Chen said, gesturing to the empty stations. "Your new squadron mates will be joining us shortly." As she settled into one of the workstations, the screens automatically adjusted to display information relevant to her clearance level. What she saw made her breath catch. Real-time tracking of aircraft that appeared nowhere in official databases, tactical assessments of encounters that had never been reported, casualty figures for battles that had never been fought. The door opened, and other pilots began filing in. She recognized some faces from her own squadron, but most were strangers. They moved with the quiet confidence of people who had been doing this for years, but their eyes held the same sharp awareness that she'd seen in her own reflection. "Ladies and gentlemen," Chen announced as the last pilot took his seat, "welcome to the real war." The central display came to life, showing a three-dimensional map of global airspace. But this wasn't the standard air traffic control picture. Instead, it showed patterns of activity that formed a complex, ever-changing web of conflict. "For the past 15 years," Chen began, "we've been engaged in a conflict that officially doesn't exist. Our enemy uses technology that appears to violate the laws of physics, tactics that seem to anticipate our responses, and intelligence-gathering capabilities that suggest a level of surveillance we can barely comprehend." The display shifted to show video footage from dozens of aerial encounters. Kira recognized some of them, incidents that had been classified as training accidents or equipment failures. But viewed together, they formed a pattern that was impossible to ignore. "Every pilot in this room has encountered this enemy," Chen continued. "Some of you, like Commander Volkov, recognized that what you were seeing didn't match the official explanation. Others initially accepted the cover story, but later began to question the inconsistencies." A new voice cut through the briefing room. "Colonel, What makes you so sure these aren't just advanced aircraft from rival nations? The question came from a pilot she didn't recognize, a woman with the bearing of a test pilot and the sharp eyes of someone who had seen too much to accept easy answers. "Good question, Major Sterling," Chen replied. "The answer is that we've traced the technology back to its source, and the source isn't terrestrial." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Kira felt her worldview shifting again, adjusting to accommodate possibilities that she'd never considered. The enemy wasn't just using advanced technology. They were using technology that didn't originate on Earth. "I know how that sounds," Chen continued, "but the evidence is undeniable. The materials science, the propulsion systems, the electronic signatures, they're all consistent with technology that's decades, possibly centuries, ahead of anything in